Hey guys, this is Dawn. Welcome back to Gulf Coast October. And in this series, I've been reading my book, Enchanted in Bay St. Yaya. And today we're going to read chapter 13. It's called Etouffe. And I'm coming to you from the beautiful historic Carnton Plantation in a town in Tennessee called Franklin. This is historic battleground area. I have asked the spirits to not mess with my camera, but if they want to make themselves known in any other way, in the background or something, they're free to. So maybe you're a listener, maybe you're a watcher, but if you're a watcher, I'd say look around behind me and see if you don't see anything interesting. So if you'd like to hang out with me while I read chapter 13, Etouffe, of my book at the historic Carnton Plantation, hang out. Welcome back. If you remember at the end of the last chapter, windy weather came to town and is basically taking over Bird's house, and Dearie just doesn't really know what to do with herself. Chapter 13, Etouffe. I didn't know what to do. I was so mad at myself for not anticipating this. I bought a $10 tent, some water bottles, and a few non-perishables at the Miser Market. I drove along the boulevard until there was no more road to drive on. The area seemed to be where the beaches met the bayous, but also some kind of dump for oyster shells. They were scattered everywhere, and huge mountains of them were piled high further up into the swamp. I couldn't go any further, so I pitched shelter just off the road and gathered some dried-out driftwood and shrubs for a fire. It proved easier imagined than executed, but I finally got it going. I sat staring at it until the moon was well high in the sky. It was pitiful. I cried and ate stale chips. I cried and ate ranch-style beans. I cried and drank water. I became terrified that an alligator would gobble me up should I fall asleep, yet I secretly prayed for one too. I wanted that selfish, lazy girl to feel guilty for ruining my life, but she didn't care. Where the hell had she been all this time? The first night on the beach was rough. I slept in a discarded folding chair that was already there, awakening at every sound. I never even used the tent that I took an hour to set up. I had, however, left it unzipped and found a nice fat diamondback water snake curled up in it when I finally peeked inside. Non-venomous, but they will bite if threatened. I didn't care. I was pissed and feeling savage. "You are lunch, buddy," I said, as I grabbed him with both of my hands. He was lunch indeed. I did my best to gut him like a fish, and while doing so, I had fantasies of disappearing forever, deep into the swamps, living off of snakes and berries. I imagined people would wonder where I went to, and maybe there would be legends and children's stories about me. Tales of a woman gone wild, lore of a survivor who now grants petitions for offerings. In a fit of fury, I screamed into the swamp that I wished windy weather would die. I hurled an entire can of clam chowder into the trees as hard as I could. It landed in the bog and was slowly swallowed up by the mud. The second night was easier. I was all cried out and slept in the chair on purpose. I had slid the tent closer to the marsh to see what else I could catch, but there was nothing. By the third day, I was nervous because I had to work at Tiki's the following day. I hadn't made any of my arrangements for my booth, and I wasn't exactly prepared for the upcoming memory book class. I was too scared to shower at the wash-off station on the pier in town, lest someone see me and give me hassle, so I was mentally preparing to pull up the old big girl panties and go talk to Claire. I was also fully aware that my foot may hit the gas, and I might drive myself right out of town. I was almost unloading everything into the back of the truck when I saw a sedan coming my way. I realized I was lucky that I hadn't yet to see a soul, even though I could tell people hung out there, maybe just not so much on weeknights. I hurried into the truck, rolled up the windows, and locked the doors. The sedan pulled all the way to the truck, and I almost wasn't even surprised when I saw who was driving. "You most positively, defiantly, and officially are a runaway. You can't even deny it this time," he said. He was trying to play cute. I hadn't even seen him since I'd started doing the classes at the Seagull Wing. I'd imagined when I would, I'd throw my arms around him and thank him. I obviously hadn't imagined the circumstances being as they were. "Hi, Lauren, are you looking for me?" "Yes," he said as he got out of the car. I had to focus on my breathing, as I was blocked in and unable to speed off. He wanted to know what I was doing out here all by myself. "Nothing much," I said, shaking my head and shrugging. I just felt like camping." "I went by your house." "Oh, yeah, that. I don't live there anymore." "You meet Wendy?" "No, but I did meet someone named Joe Aloysius. He said he was feeding the dogs, and no one knew where you went." "What? That is bullshit. I got kicked out of my house with nowhere to go." I could tell I had turned red. I was embarrassed, and my breathing technique was not working. I started sobbing. "Move your car so I can go." "Go where? I mean, if you have nowhere to go, what's the point?" "I'll figure it out, please. I'm getting confused." "Dearie, listen to me." He grabbed me by both arms so hard that I thought I would bruise. He stared at me and shook me until I made eye contact. Claire is my grandmother. What? It took me a moment to process what was happening. Have you been spying on me? It's not like that, honest. I watch after my grandmother. She gets real upset if I check on her too much. I have to keep my distance. She's worried sick about you. Did she say that? She doesn't have to. I've been following her around since yesterday morning. She's really upset. She doesn't know I'm here. We'll go see her together. I'll even fess up I've been coming to town. I can't go back. I was starting to panic. Wendy will take the truck away. It's all I have left of Bird. Why isn't she feeding Okie Doke? Ugh, that bitch. I don't know. Let's go talk to my grandmother. Please, dearie. Can you just trust me? Oh, God, I just don't know, I said as I tried to wiggle away from him. Just then, something in the brush caught my eye. Lauren noticed my face shift when my eyes tried to zone in on it. He didn't know what I saw, but I knew exactly. It was La Corteza. She was encompassing an area in the marsh between two cypress trees. If you didn't know what she could do and how she could shift, you wouldn't notice her, but I recognized her immediately. A red ball started to float around her chest area. It was a heart. I looked back at Lauren. He looked scared, but not because of the entity. He couldn't see her. I noticed the corners of his mouth were turned down a bit. His eyebrows were crooked, and his eyes were starting to water. He looked powerless. He shrugged. He spoke through his emotions. I just don't know what to do. I trust you, Lauren. I do. I'm so sorry. I do. Please don't be upset with me. I get scared easy. I've been called skittish, like a wild animal or something. He threw his arms around me, hugged me tight, and kissed my wet cheek 3 times in a row. He wiped my face off, then his, and pointed to the driver's seat of the truck. Don't let me down now? Follow me? I nodded. It was a beautiful spring-like day. We'd had temperatures in the 90s all through autumn, but today didn't feel warmer than 85 degrees. I used my drive time to focus on the beauty of how the oak trees and the mule palms share space, yet were still divided by a strip of blacktop. We drove along the beach most of the way, but he turned inland before Bird Street and he pulled over. What's going on? I yelled. I wanted to wait until I know she's home in case she went to Mass. Want to get something to eat first? He yelled back. Do I ever? How about you follow me? I drove to the hole and parked out back behind the dumpster. When we entered, June started yelling at me like she thought I was back from the dead. Her voice was shrill and cracking, and her accent was so thick that it sounded put on. She started to pick up the phone, and we both begged her to put it down. We all 3 sat, and once she was calm, Lauren and I got a chance to practice on her. Her response was frustrated but kind. Girl, how does your brain always go there? When are you going to get it through your head that we are your family? She seemed disappointed, but not in me. It bothered her that people cared about me, yet I couldn't grasp it for very long. Even if Claire turned you away, which we all know she wouldn't, you could count on me. I have seen you blossom like a field of wildflowers on steroids. I could use some of that energy at my house, she said. I wouldn't let you go on the streets either, but I promise you, my grandmother will never let that happen, Lauren added. We ate burgers for breakfast with 2 helpings of brown crispy shoestring French fries. I felt 90% better, so Lauren rode with me and we headed to Claire's. Her car wasn't there. Dang, I'm going to try by St. John's. She might be praying or something, I suggested. Lauren agreed. Sure enough, the Cutlass was there, parked sideways, but she wasn't in the sanctuary or the narthex. We found her in the kitchen with Father Fourleaf. She was clutching a tissue and I could tell she'd been crying. They both stood up when they saw us. Poor Claire looked more confused than relieved. Hi, Grandmother. I don't understand, she said, as she reached out to pull me close. She brushed my hair back like a mother bear would and pressed her lips to the side of my head. She held my face and in a whisper asked me if I was okay. Yes, ma'am. Lauren convinced me it was okay. I stood back so she could approach him. What are you doing here, my son? Have you had her the whole time? Hey, I didn't have anybody. I was alone. He found me this morning as I was trying to figure out what to do. Where have you been staying? Claire asked. I went quiet. I wanted to talk, but I couldn't get any words out. I looked at Father, and I felt ashamed for scaring everybody. Thankfully, Lauren helped me out. She was at the end of the beach road by the oyster piles. Way out there? People get taken out there to be raped and murdered. Why would you? Claire sobbed, but Father cut her off with soft, shushing sounds. Please don't do that again, he started softly. We had no idea if you were okay, and we couldn't understand why you wouldn't come to any of us. Do you know why that was hard for you? Maybe because I should be my own responsibility? No, Claire suggested. Not yet. You aren't ready to be your own responsibility. You were never taught how. And that isn't your fault. And, I continued, Wendy has the right to the house, and I don't think I can handle seeing her around. I keep thinking she's eating my root beer floats, and it's making me sick. Father and Claire began laughing, slow at first, but then they looked at each other and became borderline hysterical. It startled me, so I stood behind Lauren. I rested my hand on his shoulder, and he laid his hand on top of mine. Even through the confusion, I knew it was a special moment. "Oh, you don't have to worry about her," Father chimed in. "Something spooked her pants off. Literally. She showed up here early Thursday morning before dawn, naked from the thighs down." He was trying to not be rude, but he couldn't help but chuckle. I had to retrieve her luggage myself. "What? Why? What happened? I mean, she's okay, right?" I asked. "Oh, she'll be fine," Claire responded. She thought she saw a ghost. Granted, we don't really know what the first part of the story is. Something about the bird acting crazy. Father interrupted. She claimed that Rudy was having a heck of a time. He was talking to the dog, and the dog was barking back, and they both were carrying on, facing towards the upstairs window. Poor Wendy was becoming frazzled. Then sometime in the early hours, Miss Okey-doke jumped on the bed with something wet and muddy in her mouth and dropped it right into Wendy's lap. So naturally she needed to change her bottoms, but she claimed she saw something floating around by the upstairs window. "It was Bird," I yelled with a huge smile. Then, Claire continued, she tried to haul-tail it out the back door, but came face to face with yours truly, in the dark, and ran screaming bloody murder down the street. I didn't even have time to reason with her. At this point, we were all laughing. "Wait, why were you lurking around the back door?" I asked. "I was leaving you a note." "At the back door?" "No," Father interrupted. "She was spying on Miss Wendy before getting up the nerve to confront her." "Confront her on what?" Lauren and I both asked. "The deed to the house. She only wanted it for the money," Claire answered. "I figured, why not offer her something for it? No big deal." "However," Father interrupted, "that wouldn't be necessary anyway. I was notified early this week by Bird's lawyer, who, by the way, was not easy to track down. Bird's last will and testament was recently updated. Wendy has no rights to the property, nor did she ever. I told her this when she came to talk to me the evening before, but she claimed she wasn't leaving, that she was broke and she needed to sell everything. She even asked how much she could sell the dog for." "That bitch," I snapped. Lauren ducked because I swore in front of a priest, but Father agreed and referred to her as lost and unstable. Claire spoke. "It doesn't matter, sweetheart, it doesn't matter. You can go home." I was confused. I thought she was saying I could go back to Bird's, but I didn't want to get my hopes up. "Who owns the house now?" I asked. "You do," Claire answered. "What? I own a house?" I replied. "Technically," Father corrected, "the bank owns the property. However, the deed is to be transferred to one Miss Deary Lawlerman to continue to pay the note here on out until the note is paid off." "How much is that?" I asked Father. "Again, technically, the mortgage is at $658 a month. I can't afford—" "However," he continued, "Miss Claire has a proposition for you." "Yes, I do," she picked up. "The mortgage only has $8,000 left on it. I am more than happy to pay that off for you." I stared at the wall. I didn't understand what any of this meant. I put my hands over my temples and I looked down. Lauren chimed in. "So she just gets the house?" "It's up to her. She can pay a small mortgage to me for an agreed amount of time if it will make her feel better." Claire was looking at me, but not directly at me, and this soothed my chaotic mind. "Okay, how much for how long?" "How about, Miss Deary, you pay Miss Claire a sum of $200 every month until your birthday in the year 2001. "Is that enough?" I asked. "Sure it is. It pays it off perfectly," he replied. Claire agreed. "So I can go home?" I looked at Lauren and smiled. He, however, looked exhausted. Everyone did. I knew it was my fault, but my friends seemed so forgiving, so I forgave myself. "Yes, go home," Claire laughed. "But not you, grandson. You're coming home with me." She put her hands on his shoulders, turned him toward the door, and guided him out. I sat with Father a little longer. I told him I was overdue for confession anyway, and it turned into a small counseling session for the spirit. He assured me that if any paperwork was to be made out, it could be through him, and he would keep it organized. And if by any chance I heard from Wendy, I needed to call the police, because she can be very charming, but her intentions will always be selfish. The next order of business was to get the phone bill in my name. "How'd you get her to leave?" I asked. "Like, if she was so obsessed on selling everything, surely a little fright wasn't going to make her leave for good." "Well, her first suggestion was an exorcism of the house. What she was probably referring to would be a blessing of the home, but she had no business being there, and I didn't care much for her bossy attitude. One of my assumptions when I took the holy cloth was that I would not have to be controlled by a neurotic woman with no pants on. She practically tried to carry me out of the church. I suggested that the only thing that needed to be exercised was her. Oh, you did not. What did she say to that? I asked, excited. She declined, fretfully. I did agree, however, to retrieve her breeches, her luggage, and that weird automobile of hers. Floyd? Ha! Most definitely a weird automobile. That reminds me, what about Bird's truck? 100% yours. Nobody wants it anyway. He winked and rubbed my arm. Thank you, Father. What can I do for you? I asked. He pondered a moment. I've never been one to turn down a home-cooked meal. I'm sure Father Freddie was more well-received than I. Unfortunately, I'm only presented with meals a few times a month, besides a weekly dinner from Claire, of course. That's horrible. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. That's quite all right, dearie. Like Claire mentioned, people have to be shown how to act like adults. No problem. It also wouldn't hurt to see your backside in a pew more than once in a while as well. That was not what I wanted to hear. I'd rather cook every day than have to go to Mass on a regular schedule. But it was what it was. Miss Dearie, don't forget this, he said as he handed me something. My key, she gave it to you? Nope, it was on the table when I fetched her things. I locked up afterward and I kept it. Which reminds me, I had Joel make a copy for himself to feed the animals. I suggest you let him keep it in case of an emergency. He will be your handyman from here on out. He already is, I shrugged. Later. I was so happy to be home. I spent time loving on Okie Doke and Rudy and praying for Bird to come see me should I dream later. I lit candles all over the house and burned cinnamon on the stove to get rid of Wendy's smell. After a well-needed nap, I went to the charity shop in search of cookbooks so I could make good on my promise to Father. And truth be told, I was hoping I could cook for Lauren sometime as well. I also found a cool floppy sun hat and some tweed flip-flops. I was feeling brand new and inspired. I sat in the car flipping through recipes, and I found a great one for Etouffe. So I popped in by Mary's to ask her what she thought. She had been so worried but was all ears and wanted to hear every detail about Wendy and my camping adventure. She gave me all the herbs, veggies, and seasonings that I needed and explained them. But she said I'd have to go get the shrimp on my own and that the Pass Harbor may still have some good brown ones, but I may have to go to the grocer. I stopped by the house to drop off the produce and was happy to see Joe Al standing in the driveway. Went camping, huh? Damn, word travels fast. Well, you know, June. Anyhow, I'm glad you're okay. I came to give you your spare key and see if you need anything. Keep the key. Father said you're my official handyman. What else did he say? Then no one ever feeds him and I have to go to church more often. Of course he did, he laughed. What you got there? Some ingredients. I want to make Étouffée for him, but I have to figure out how to buy the shrimp. Well, hell, I can help with that. Can I ride? Yes, please do. Do I go to the harbor? You can, but Silly's has some up on the highway. Up there by your old work? He was having to freeze a mess of them last week. They'll still be good. Perfect. Silly's was just a small white building with a bright blue roof and a large blue crab painted on each side. We ordered at the window. He told me how to clean them and how to save any stock. He seemed older than dirt, so I reckoned I should listen. Back at the house before Joe Al left, I offered him some supper to repay him for helping me. He declined for now, but suggested I'll owe him later when I get good at it. I agreed. I spent the next hour washing, soaking, cutting, and measuring ingredients. Just before I turned on the stovetop, I realized I had no butter, no oil, no drippings, no shortening, lard, or anything. Nothing. I was so close. But just as I was headed out the door, Lauren was about to knock. Yay, I don't have to go by myself. Hello to you too, he said. He was holding a brown grocery bag. What's in there? Huh? I was smiling and hyper. He was happy to see it. Well, I wanted a reason to come over. My grandmother kept trying to talk me into bringing something about a shark coochie. You brought me shark coochie, I asked. Well, no. Oh, dang. I thought we could make cookies. Cookies? I perked up. Do you want to make cookies? No, not really, I smiled. Is there butter in there? Lard. You may enter. I stepped back, bowed, and waved my arm to welcome him in. I was thrilled to not have to leave. Are you okay? Are you on drugs? He asked. No, I laughed. I don't even drink, Goofy. I'm just happy. You are? To see me? Yes. Why is that? He asked, blushing. Because you saved me. I needed butter for my Étouffée for Father. He set the bag on the table, put his arm around my waist, and pulled me all the way to him. Our torsos were touching. Looks like I saved you twice in one day, he said. His voice was low and salty. I panicked and pressed my lips closed. He laughed and let go. My heart was pounding. I couldn't tell if he was joking or actually pursuing me. He seemed unfazed, clapped his hands together, and walked into the kitchen. I assumed he was joking around, so I let it go. That was fine because what I didn't know until that night was that his job out there in Metairie was as a kitchen supervisor at a restaurant. He also told me that he'd been pussyfooting around the idea with moving to the coast and managing a casino kitchen. We talked about his friend who runs the galley at the casino Enchanted right here in Bay St. Yaya, and how one of the head chefs is moving way out to California at the first of the year. Lauren showed me how to make a mean shrimp étouffée, and then of course we made cookies. We took half of everything to the church, and Father was happy to receive a fantastic meal. He was also happy to see me happy. He had a meeting though, so we gave him his supper and came back to the house. Lauren mentioned that it was late and he could either stay at his grandmother's or he could drive back to Metairie. I replied that my biggest problem was that I slept on the couch even though I had a queen-size bed upstairs. I meant nothing suggestive. "Want me to hold your hand?" he said, reaching out with his body facing the stairs. I stared at him for an entire minute before replying. Okay, but for how long?" "All night." I let him take my hand. He led me up my own stairs to my own room, and I told him that if he dreamed of an old man floating by the window, he doesn't have to do anything, because it's just Bird. And since he's dead, he can get through the window better on his own, and doesn't need our help. Then I told him that that was how I found out that the window sticks. Lauren nodded up and down as if taking notes in his mind. Rudy didn't seem bothered at all. We got up the stairs. I stood next to one side of the bed, and Lauren stood next to the other. He took off his hat, his shirt, his shoes, his pants, and his watch. I took off my flip-flops, my bra, and nervously my shorts. We curled up in bed with our legs touching. He rubbed his face in my hair, kissed my forehead, and closed his eyes. Within moments I could hear a faint snore. Bless his heart. Bless my own. Maybe he wanted nothing more from me than companionship after all. I could relax. I fell asleep. Sometime in the night I awoke to the sound of tapping on the window. "Bird!" I jumped up to greet him, thinking that Lauren would get up too, but he stayed fast asleep. I tried to nudge him, but my hand went straight through him. "What are y'all doing in my bed?" he laughed. "I didn't do anything, honest. Why won't he wake up?" "Because this is your visit, not his. What you cooking?" "We made étouffée for Father Fourleaf. It's good. You want some?" "Sure I do. Can you stay longer this time?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied. And with that, we were sitting at the kitchen table. We both had a bowl of shrimp and rice before us. We were halfway done before it occurred to me that I didn't even know how we got there, or how there was still so much food left over. He reminded me that I was still dreaming. Still, he had to encourage me to go back to bed before I fell back asleep, lest Lauren may get cold and come looking for me. The realm between the living and the dead confuses me. The next morning, to the shock of Lauren and I both, there were 2 dirty bowls on the table. "Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Bird came by last night. We ate étouffée." "You ate étouffée with Bird, your dead friend, last night, at this table?" "Yeah," I replied. We stared at each other. He scratched his head and picked up the bowls. "Well, okay then. Let's clean up this mess and get some coffee." My bond with Lauren stayed platonic. Maybe my relationship with my dead friend was too weird for him, or maybe he didn't want to get involved with his grandma's friends. He stayed here in the Bay for a few days before he went back to Metairie. He spent some time with me, but mostly stayed with Claire and pondered if he should go work for the casino. I enjoyed the company, but I also enjoyed when he left. The novelty of him popping up at random times was gone, and I no longer got a nervous rush from it. I was happy to get back to my work, making art, working at the antique store, and guiding the memory book classes at the nursing home. And that is the end of this chapter, and I hope I see you in the next 2 chapters, because next time when we meet, I'm going to be reading the last 2 chapters because they are short. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to start from the beginning, I have a link to the playlist below. I'm trying to connect the chapter before and the chapter after at the end of these videos, so it's easier to navigate. And if you do like this and you want to go to Goodreads and give me a review, I would greatly appreciate it. Other than that, be blessed, be a blessing, blessed be, and I hope you enjoy your day. I keep checking because whenever I'm in haunted areas, my technology acts up, so that's why I keep checking on the phone to see if my phone's still working. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to pause to recognize the wind. We have not been having wind here, and whenever I get in a very spiritual place and I ask the spirits to say hi and I say hi back, this is usually one of the ways that the spirits say hi. And I hear a lot of people. I'm gonna have to hit pause. I don't know if it's going. Is it going? It's been about 5 minutes, sorry. Okay, and then the wind came back. That is so weird. Okay, let me get back to it. Let's see. It is never this noisy when I come here. What is going on? Hush, bird. Okay, I gotta reread this whole sentence. Thanks, Blue Jay. Thank you.